evolved big time since then, but I decided to create a web show and podcast for entrepreneurs back in the day, and that's how the Rise to the Top started. It started as me doing interviews, very much like this one, with all kinds of different entrepreneurs, and realized that when I started, I really, besides, yes, I had no idea what I was doing. I had no fans, no business connections, no real business model. I was figuring all this kind of stuff out as we go. But really, that's how it all started in 2008, was just this idea of, creating this platform, and that's kind of where it started from scratch, really.
And so the idea now, and obviously it's evolved, you're really doing, I think, and you've really kind of developed what I think is, I don't want to call it a niche, but you kind of developed this place inside of, new media where it's a real show. It's something, it's a destination. How did you really develop it to be, rather than something that you wanted to put into the search engine, have people find, but people come to your site, I think, because they want to come there?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. So it evolves so much over time. And I think that you hit it nail on the head there in terms of like the key word is like evolve, if I were to choose one word, right? So, if you fast forward to now, I make, from the site, multiple six figures of income. We've got thousands and thousands of fans. It's led to all kinds of interesting opportunities. But really one of the key things that happened, and you just hit the nail on the head, was that I went from like sort of this general interview show about entrepreneurship, and as you know, that's a very broad category, very broad category, because an entrepreneur can be, the attorney working by himself, the mom and pop shop on the corner, or the tech startup in Silicon Valley, right? Right on. And I realized over time, really just through trial and error and getting used to who I felt resonated the best with me and who I was most excited to talk to, I realized that the big niche for me was what I call mediapreneurs, which is, kind of like everyone that's on this call today. So oftentimes folks that are, sort of solo, smaller, online, creating platforms, monetizing their expertise. That's really who this audience became. And the Rise to the Top since then's evolved to cater to those folks, both through the show and through my videos and through my free content, and then also through products and programs. And that was a big evolution. So we actually got, for lack of a better term, smaller rather than bigger, more specific as opposed to more general, and that's really when the brand really took off.
Right on. So let's talk about some of this monetization, because I think you've kind of got a little bit of that down. I'm starting a show. Let's say I'm on this call. I'm starting a show. What kind of, give us an idea of the kind of directions we could go in terms of monetization.
Right. And so this is a great question, and I actually even brought some notes because I thought this was such an important thing to talk about in general, because you got to realize, like I said, when I started, I figured this stuff all out, what I mean, just by trial and error and going through it, and now I get to share this kind of stuff, which I love. So, for me, what I was trying to do, and I bet everyone today probably has similar aspirations to this, okay? When I was generating revenue or looking to generate revenue for the long run, there were 5 things I was really looking for that were very important. And very quickly, I'll go over those. Number 1 is I wanted big revenue, right? I wanted big revenue, not small revenue. Number 2 is I wanted big impact. And what I mean by that is that, happy customers, you feel good about it, meaning like it's not some sleazy, sketchy internet thing that you see sometimes. It's like you feel good about it, and you're getting people results, right? Because a lot of people that are on here that are consultants and coaches and different things like that, that your business is focused on results. So I want a big impact. Number 3, I wanted scalability. I wanted something that could scale up over time without requiring another David, because I don't know how to reproduce myself. So meaning like something that was scalable. Number 4 is I wanted to not trade dollars for hours. I wanted to punch dollars for hours in the face, meaning I wanted leverage. I wanted something that I could do a ton of work on now and get paid for it over and over again. And the final thing was freedom. And not being tied to the computer 24/7 like you are with some other ways of monetizing, and also with my wife not wanting to kill me. Because, if I'm like on vacation or something and I have the laptop, so wife wanting to kill me was definitely one of the key things here that I wanted to avoid, if you will. So those were kind of the criteria I went for. And I did a lot of it, again, trial and error, talked to a lot of people, interviewed hundreds of people, did tons of research. And what I realized was the things that I was trying, speaking, one-on-one coaching, group coaching, sponsorships even, having a traditionally published book, all these things fit some criteria and didn't fit another criteria. So, for example, I was either generating revenue, but I was, tied to traveling on the road, which I wasn't necessarily interested in. I was generating revenue, but I was like locked into the computer 24/7, having one-on-one coaching calls, ready to kill myself. Sponsorships, while great, and I still have some, they're great revenue, but they have sort of the lower impact, and they're not as dependable because someone could wake up in the middle of the night and decide, you know what, we don't want to sponsor him anymore, and that could really kill your business because a lot of people, and this is the big mindset shift I want to get across here to folks that are like in the show mode and getting theirs going or building it, is that when I started, I thought sponsorships and advertising were the holy grail. I thought, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this show. I'm going to make it big. And then all of a sudden, I'm going to get these sponsors and advertisers. And actually, believe it or not, we've done pretty well with sponsorships and advertisers. But what I've realized is the long-term success of your business is not going to be based on sponsorships and advertisers. Because like I said, it can be flaky. It can be difficult. And especially now, and we talked about this earlier, Charles, the real impact I think that comes from shows are the ones that are more specific. You know what I mean? And like you said, yours is darn specific here. So, I mean, that's a good thing. And when you're specific, your total audience might be less when it comes to just amount. So sponsors might not be as interested because they're looking for big in numbers and size. But for that same amount of people, if you create your own products and programs, that is really where you have the scale. And that's where it hits the 5 things. And that was the big shift for me, was realizing that I needed to create my own flagship online courses. And those were the things that hit the 5 criteria. And once I did that, it completely changed the business and all the things I was talking about.
David, how did you go from the mind shift? Because I think there's a second mind shift you have to go to, from sort of you sort of buying, information in order to help you to do things, to creating information to sell in order to say, okay, I'm an authority enough to sell you, to kind of show you how to do this. How did you make that mind shift in order to do that?
Yeah, and it was tricky, and it wasn't an overnight thing. It wasn't sitting there and thinking, about like this. It wasn't an overnight. It was a progression. A few things, like for example, some people come to me at events and say, why don't you have any products for sale? And I'm like, okay, that's a little interesting of a question. Let me think about that and get back to you. I didn't have a great answer. Then, of my research and my interviews, all the top mediapreneurs, that's the phrase I use to describe people, I looked, what do they all have in common? You know what I mean? What do they all have in common? And in the top ones, the most respected ones, they all had these courses. They all had these programs. And I was like, God, I don't have one. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know what it should be on. And this is kind of the key thing, is that it was right under my nose the entire time. And often for folks, it's the same case. So what I did is I started looking at, what questions am I getting all the time? What questions are coming into me on my site? Which blog posts and shows that I've done got the biggest response? Which one had the most comments? Which one had the most views? Different things like that. Can I put some patterns together of something that I could teach people and package up into a course? And oftentimes the mistake people make, and I'm thankful I made a lot of mistakes, but this wasn't one of them, was that a lot of mistakes they make is they say, well, what can I go out there and learn how to do and then create a course? And that's, I think, the wrong mentality. The mentality is really, what do I know right now? What have I done that I have proof in the pudding, if you will, that either I've done for myself and or other people that I can then package up and sell, because it's often right under our nose. And so what I realized was that the key questions that were coming in at the time were people wanting to do their own show. They had questions about, how do you get guests? How do you do interviews? How do you make money from it? How do you? And I realized that there was an opportunity there to create an extremely niche product called Create Awesome Interviews to teach people how to basically create a show like The Rise to the Top. And that's really where the shift came from, and it really has changed my freaking universe once we got into the product creation and selling mentality.
Because, again, you really created now the kind of leverage that you were talking about earlier, because you're not tied to the computer. You're not necessarily tied to a client per se. You really are creating something one time, and then you make the sale, and then you've got freedom to start almost working on the next thing.
Yeah, I mean, like the way I like to look at it is I like to avoid treadmills as much as I can. I don't mean that in the gym,
No,
but what I mean though is that there's sometimes where there's just these things in your business that just go on and on and on and on and on and on and on, and it gets really annoying. And so for me, just like you said, I like to kind of approach it as a project in a certain way, where you spend a huge phase of your project creating the project. I mean, actually getting it together and doing some smart marketing and getting it out there. And then after that, it's really, I don't want to call it autopilot, because I think that kind of gives some negative connotations, because I'm not
cheesy,
implying,
sure, right,
and I'm not implying that there's no work involved, because it's not like a no work situation. But once you get these things in place, and once you have the positioning, once you have it, and you continue your promotions, you wake up in the morning. I grab my, iPhone like I'm not supposed to, or whatever. Everyone says don't grab it first when you wake up. We all do it.
right, yeah.
And so I grab my phone and I go to my email like I'm not supposed to as well. And, when you look in there and you see sales overnight, do you know what I mean? That is kind of the magic that comes from that. It doesn't require me being there. It doesn't require additional work on my part. It just requires some basically a decent amount of upfront work, and then putting systems into place so that you're making sales 24/7.
And you got to figure, and a lot of the folks who are going to be listening to this call, they've got this dual role. They're sort of starting their shows,
Yep.
but at the same time, they're consultants for small businesses. They've got to be there for just about every dollar of that. So that's got to make a difference, I've got to guess.
Yeah, it does, but here's what's cool, and I love this, because the fun thing is I don't get to say this to every audience. I wish I got to say this to every audience. It's like you guys are, but this is a great audience that's perfectly positioned to do a product and program, because, one of the greatest ways to create it is that you have, for people that are out there consulting, I guarantee you're getting similar questions all the time. Right? I mean, like, just the way it is. Like person X is asking for this. Person X is asking for this. And so some of the best courses that are out there and online programs are simply from people that are consultants and coaches that looked out there and said, okay, what are the most common things I'm talked about? What are those recurring themes? How can I now take this and put it into a step-by-step system? Because that's really what a course is. It's a step-by-step system with a specific result at the end of the system. And what I've noticed is, for me, there's like this chicken or egg thing that I hear all the time. It's people are like, well, what do I do first? Do I create a product first? Do I create a platform first? When do I create the product? When do I create the platform? And these questions can go on for hours, and they're a little confusing, and it goes a long way. So first of all, I wish I would have created mine 2 years before I did, at least.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, why do you say that? That's interesting.
Because there's no perfect time to create a product. There's no, the product fairy doesn't come flying in through the window and, give you a little wand and be like, okay, now you're ready. It's like you're never quite ready, and you're never quite not ready. So what I realized is that the earlier on you can do it, you need to be focused on audience building. It's very, very important, right? But it's almost a simultaneous thing of at least start to be thinking about products and programs, because you don't want to get into what I call the media trap, which is you become obsessed with your show and your platform and you forget to make money. And I've seen this. I know it sounds kind of sad, but I've seen this many a time. It's like people obsess way too much on just the show and that part, and they forget to make the money over here. So I see it sort of as a simultaneous thing, not necessarily from day one. Like if you can do it from day one, great. If you're very clear on who your market is and you're very clear on what your expertise is, that's great. Go for it. I'm not stopping you. But I'm telling you, even by just doing a product and a course and getting it out there and going through sort of a launch and trying these different things, even if it's not massively successful from a revenue standpoint, it's also an amazing list builder and subscriber builder and credibility builder just by doing it. So there's other values to doing it earlier on rather than later. So I would not be I don't want to give that concrete answer of saying, like, you have to have X subscribers, you have to have X amount of content, or you should be doing this for X amount of years before you do it, because there really isn't a right answer there.
Right, yeah. Now you've actually done, I mean, you did something called Create Awesome Interviews, but you started doing something different now. What's your latest project that you're working on now?
Yeah, so my philosophy, really simple, is this. I like to learn something, and by learn it, I mean obsess like a psycho. And I'm like one of those people, and I'm like, obsess and interview and do that stuff. Then, of course, I implement it and experiment with it, whatever it might be, because I don't want to be one of those serial learners that doesn't do anything, right? So I learn it and do it, learn from trial and error, and then I love to basically share it with people and teach them so they can do the same. That's my entire business model is focused on that, And this process of going through this course, Create Awesome Interviews and promoting it and marketing it, was the biggest eye-opening experience I've ever seen. And realized when I did this, there wasn't like I had 10,000 people on my email list or anything like that. I'll tell you right now, when I launched the product, this is the fun fact. I'll tell you the exact number. This will make you cry in your seat, okay? When I launched the product, I had a list of interested prospects that I sort of built up. There were only 400 prospects on that list when I launched it, and it resulted over time, as that started to build with momentum, multiple six figures of income on a $495 product, okay, which is crazy.
Wow.
Now, so I don't want people to get scared and say, I don't have that 100,000 person list, I don't have that 50,000 person list, right? So here's the thing, and this is where it gets to the point, is then, of course, I started getting questions from people asking about Create Awesome Interviews, the behind the scenes. How can I do this for my own platform? How can I take my show or podcast or blog or expertise, and how do I turn that into a course and basically, David, do what you did and do it in the exact way you did it, meaning like hold me by the hand, like grab me kicking and screaming and say how to do it. Because one of my subscribers, Umar, sent me an email and he said, what I love, he said, is that there's all these people out there that say, you know what, go create a course or go create a product.
Yeah, they do.
They're like,
yeah, they do.
They're like, all right, I'm going to go do it. But bottom line is, there's not really a blueprint that's like really step-by-step to specifically create a course that creates freedom for you, meaning that, you're not sitting there trying to sell it, on your own 24/7 behind a computer.
Right.
And so for me, I took everything I knew, including mistakes, including best practices, including everything, handheld everyone through the entire system, and that's where Create Awesome Online Courses was born, was the idea to teach people exactly how to do this. Give them the blueprint and say, listen, I don't want to hear that excuse anymore of saying I don't know exactly what to do, I don't know what software to use, I don't know how to market it, I don't know how to do a launch, I don't know how to record it. I said, fine, I'm going to show you all this stuff so that I'm going to eliminate all the excuses, and I want to show you how to do this because I know just like in my heart how this can impact people because of how it impacted me. And I'm not just saying from a revenue standpoint, I'm talking about from all the things I mentioned earlier, impact and freedom and all these different things. And so I want to share that with people, and that's where the new course was born.
Right. But the revenue obviously impacts all those things. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. I'm going to make it easy. I mean, for those of you who are on the call, he's got actually almost like a course within a course. There's a free, just a lot of free information. If you go to gainmindshare.com/David, you can get into his world, and you'll kind of get the picture on what he's talking about in terms of this course. Again, that's gainmindshare.com/David, and you should just be on his email list anyway, so that you can really see the show. I think that you ought to see the show and really see what he's doing just in terms of that, because you guys are all getting started doing yours. You really do want to get that feel. David, I know we're coming up on 30 minutes. If I could chain you to your chair and keep you on the camera, I would, but I don't. I want to respect your time. Give us some last words, and then we'll let you go.
Well, first of all, this is great. And I got to say, Charles, I got to give you credit here, too. I mean, really, I do a lot of, I do a lot of interviews in both ways, meaning being interviewed and on interviews. I really enjoyed this today. I really, really did. You're great at it, and it was extremely valuable, I think, for I hope for everyone. Yeah, and like I said, on the free training that Charles just mentioned, that link, check it out. Like, I pride myself on giving away amazing training to people too. Because I really do. I really want people to be successful. And of course, at the end of that training, there's an opportunity to join the program if you want. If not, great. But bottom line is, I really hope you guys get the videos and get those mindset shifts and learn those things that you can do right now. Because I got to tell you, if I would have known this stuff 3 or 4 years earlier than when I did, we'd be doing this interview with Charles right now from my yacht. We'd be doing it. I'd have a yacht. Or maybe in my plane. I'm not sure which one. But bottom line is, the earlier you can understand this stuff and kind of grasp hold of it, the better. And I hope that people enjoy it for sure.
Right on, right on. Well, everybody, I know this has been informative for you, enjoyable. David, you're awesome. Appreciate you, man. And the next time you're doing whatever your next thing is, I hope you'll come back and join us again.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'll be back for sure.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. Have a great day and a pleasant tomorrow. Take care.